What's up, folks? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and we are continuing covering the new Dark Angels Codex leaks that are out. We have basically the whole Codex. It's all very exciting, and this time we're going to talk about datasheets. Now, I'm going to preface this video with a little disappointment. They're mostly the same. Nothing really changed between the index supplement for Dark Angels and the Codex. Unfortunately, it's all mostly remained essentially identical. But we'll talk about what is in here, a couple of new things that have changed, as well as how we can approach these data sheets in context with the rest of the Codex that we have. You know, now that we have stratagems and subfaction abilities and all this stuff, some of how we look at these data sheets is going to change. And I think no more than in the HQ slot, which is where we'll start. I did talk about those subfaction abilities and stratagems and everything in previous videos, so if you check those out, I did a whole video on stratagems and the detachment abilities, and then I did a separate video on warlord traits, relics, psychic powers, secondary objectives, all that stuff. So if you want context for this one, I highly recommend you go check those out. I'll put links to them in the description. First off, we have Azrael. He basically has not changed at all. He's going to stay at the same pretty pricey point cost of 170 points. He retains his Lion Helm ability, which gives everything a 4+ of invulnerable save within 6 inches, at least infantry and bikers. And this has sort of been an interesting ability because up until this point, a lot of the biker units in the faction have not had innate invulnerable saves. So you were bringing him a lot in conjunction with a lot of the biker units, the big beefy biker units that you wanted to use as kind of your bulwark to buff them up with that 4+ invuln. Now they have Jink built in, so when they move, they get a 5+ invuln. When they advance, they get a 4+ invuln. So you can just call those units as advancing every turn, and they're going to be pretty difficult to hit with that anyway. Even if they're out of the normal Space Marine Codex, so Outriders and ATVs and bike units and attack bikes, those are all going to get Jink in this new Codex. So I'm not sure Azrael really sees that much use anymore. Now, the downside for that Jink keyword is that it's harder to get the 4+ invuln. You do have to advance, which means your shooting is a little bit mitigated. And the high-speed focus stratagem only works on vehicles now. So you can't just pop into a 4+ invuln, even if you don't want to advance. So there may still be some places for Azrael in the faction, but on the whole, his role of giving people a 4+ invulnerable save seems a little superseded by the mechanics that the faction has now. Moving on to Belial, Master of the Deathwing. He is bringing along the Warlord trait for -1 damage now, if you do decide to make him your Warlord, which I think is a good one since he wants to play, you know, up close and personal with your opponent's army. And his ranged and melee output is both very good. The downside I do see for Belial is that the Ravenwing side of the faction seems so much more powerful now that I don't know how many people are focusing on Deathwing. That said, Deathwing starting on the table looks a little bit more spicy now that there's no combined assault. So if you are bringing a big brick of Terminators or something like that, Belial can buff them up with those full rerolls to hit, and I think that's wonderful. So it depends on how these lists shake out for right now. I'm sort of expecting most Dark Angels lists are going to build into a second company detachment, an Outrider detachment, alongside a patrol or maybe a battalion of just regular Green Marines. And you might fit 1 or 2 units of Deathwing in there for Belial to support. But otherwise, I don't know how much support the Deathwing is going to be getting. Now, speaking of Ravenwing, we do have Sammael. And one of the reasons that people brought Sammael a lot previously was to trigger Combined Assault off of him, because he does have the fly keyword, which is a really big deal. So he can fly over intervening enemy units and then drop Terminators in their backline. Unfortunately, that combo does not exist anymore. But you are potentially bringing Ravenwing Black Knights alongside Weapons of the Dark Age to deal an immense amount of damage, and Sammael supports that just fine. So I think Sammael probably in a very similar place. He also brings the fallback and shoot and charge Warlord trait. Probably okay, especially since he gets the benefit for charging with his sword. His sword becomes strength 8 rather than strength 6 when he charges in. So if you do make him your Warlord, he can play in and out of combat a little bit. But if it's very important to you that he doesn't get bogged down in combat, you do have that stratagem to just pull out of combat if you need to. So I'm not even sure you're going to really use that Warlord trait. Ezekiel is where stuff gets interesting. Again, he has not actually sort of mechanically changed the rules on his datasheet from the supplement. However, what has changed is the Codex around him. He's always had the Master Interrogator ability, which hilariously in the index supplement didn't do anything because it only gives you +1 to cast Interromancy powers, which did not exist until this Codex came out. He gets a blanket +1 to cast Interromancy. which means he's essentially a chief librarian for no CP cost. He doesn't cost you the Warlord trait for Psychic Mastery for +1 to cast, and like we talked about before, a lot of these Interromancy spells are very difficult to cast. Honestly, that might be Ezekiel's fault, that dick, because he does give you a passive +1. Unfortunately, the big downside of Ezekiel is that he himself has the Chief Librarian keyword, so you can't bring him alongside a Chief Librarian, which I was actually kind of excited about. When I first looked at his data sheet, I was like, oh, we could get 2 casters bringing in Interromancy spells with +1. That sounds amazing, but no, unfortunately that is illegal. You can only bring one of them. But if you don't want to waste the Warlord trait spot or the extra points on upgrading a standard librarian to get that +1, Ezekiel, I think, is here for you. Now, unfortunately, his Warlord trait doesn't really help you very much. He has the stand around for a turn when you die Warlord trait. Hilariously, I think there is an interaction with that and Perils of the Warp, because if he kills himself with Perils, he could just continue to cast, because he sticks around until the end of the turn, which is sort of hilarious, but I'm not sure that's worth your Warlord trait. Maybe we just try not to Perils in the first place. Maybe we make that the goal. Don't kill yourself, Ezekiel. That said, Ezekiel's profile has always been really good. He's a 2+ weapon skill librarian, which happens very rarely. He's also coming in with a 4+ invulnerable save. Again, a really rare thing for librarians to be so, powerful in close combat. Only 3 attacks, so 4 with Shock Assault. Not amazing. And being a named character means that he is very restricted on what he can do. But he does get you an additional deny. So that Chief Librarian keyword does get you 2 casts, 2 denies, a +1 out of Interromancy. However, he can't do something like take Tome of Malkador to know another power out of the Librarius discipline, which is something that a lot of librarians right now are going to want to be doing. So I think it's a toss-up between Ezekiel or a standard librarian when you're building your army. If you want the jump hack and the flexibility, definitely take the standard librarian, but if you don't, definitely take a look at Ezekiel. He's also got a mastercrafted bolt pistol. That's fun. We've Asmodai in here. Again, a model that hasn't really changed, but the faction sort of changed around him a little bit. Unfortunately for Asmodai, he's competing directly with like a Wise Orator Master of Sanctity, and he falls pretty hard short. He's just a regular Interrogator-Chaplain. He gives +1 recite litanies and +3 inches to the range of the litany, which is awesome. And he has some additional benefits. He knows additional litanies, and he can count enemies within 6 inches of him at below half strength. Not to mention the fact that he's got his little additional attack with a 2d3 weapon, damage weapon, which is kind of sweet. But if you're bringing a chaplain, there's really no reason to take Asmodai over a standard chaplain, especially like a bike chaplain that also gets the Ravenwing keyword and benefits from that stuff. He and Asmodai are fighting directly, and the bike Primaris chaplain is like the same cost with the Master of Sanctity upgrade, which is like sort of damning to this guy. If for some reason you need 2 chaplains, only one of them can be upgraded to Master of Sanctity, so you could take Asmodai as your second. And at that point, you have 3 litany recitations all going off on a 2, which is pretty good. I think that's the only place that I would take Asmodai. It's sort of the opposite of Ezekiel, where Ezekiel does not work well with other librarians. Asmodai, I think, does work well with other chaplains, but it's a rare list that needs more than 1 chaplain and has the HQ slots to unlock. Asmodai also bringing in the aura of +1 strength as his Warlord trait, if you decide to make him the Warlord. For where Asmodai is going to be standing on the table, that seems pretty okay, but I don't know if you want to build your Warlord around being special characters. The standard Interrogator-Chaplain has also remained exactly the same. It's just a regular chaplain with +1 wound, +1 attack for a couple extra points. Amazing. These are great. Interrogator-Chaplains have always been sweet, so there you are. Curiously, the Talonmaster also stayed the same point cost, which is really inexpensive, coming in at only 160 points for this guy. And being a lieutenant, having the company heroes role, means you can bring multiple Talonmasters. Means you can easily bring multiple Talonmasters in your list. Like, you could, for 480 points, pop 3 of these guys in your list. They only take up 2 HQ slots. You do have to split them between 2 separate detachments, but that's not that big of a deal because you probably want 1 Ravenwing detachment. I think with the new Ravenwing detachments being open, Talonmaster's probably going to see a lot more play. They should already be seeing play. This profile's incredible, and especially in a meta that we may be aiming at where 2 damage weapons aren't super good, having that twin assault cannon on a 2+ ballistic skill model that also ignores cover sometimes. Plus, if you're taking a lot of Ravenwing, they also have their aura to ignore cover, which is also good. I mean, Talonmasters are just great. They've always been great. They're going to continue to be great. I was reading through the Codex, and I noticed the datasheet for Lazarus, and I was surprised that I've never seen this datasheet before. I think this guy's new as of 9th edition, or maybe somewhere recent. I don't remember when he came out. This profile seems not that bad. He has the Intractable Will rule, which lets him fight on death when he dies, but unlike the Only in Death Does Duty and Stratagem, where you can only fight on death if you haven't already been chosen to fight that turn, Lazarus can fight again. His profile isn't that great, but if you're able to swing twice with this guy, I think that makes up for it. He comes in at strength 6, -4 for 2 flat damage, 4 flat damage against Psychers. So you can imagine big guys like, I don't know, Mortarion. He can swing in with that big 4 flat damage weapon, and Mortarion kills him. He swings again pretty good. He also gives you blanket protection from mortal wounds. He gives you a 5+ damage ignore to everything within 6 inches. Not core, by the way. Everything. So it's just Litany of Faith in a 6-inch aura all the time. You don't need to spend a chaplain on it. You don't need to do any of that. And he himself ignores mortal wounds on a 4+. So even stuff exploding, perils of the warp around him, random contagion auras, he's going to be ignoring that pretty consistently. He's also sort of a standard Primaris captain stat line. So 6 wounds, 5 attacks, hitting on 2s with that strength 6 weapon. Pretty good. Pretty okay. I don't think Lazarus is like particularly amazing, but there are definitely going to be some meta games where having that permanent Litany of Faith on the model that you're playing sort of central to your gun line, I think is going to be really important. If you're worried about Haywire or something and you're trying to bring vehicles, Lazarus is awesome. He also locks into the Brilliant Strategist Warlord trait, just like Azrael does if you take him as your Warlord, and it feels to me like a lot of the game he's going to be standing in a position where he's going to make really good use of that Warlord trait as well. Brilliant Strategist, if you're running Gunline, Dark Angels is pretty good. And Lazarus feels like he can run a gunline pretty well. And then, late game, he comes in and he doesn't represent a particularly dangerous character, but if you kill him, he basically takes down whatever he was fighting with. He's also only 110 points, which is like kind of okay for a captain. I definitely wouldn't take him in every list, but it depends on how the meta shapes up. If you're worried about like a bunch of psychic powers or smite spams or something like that, I definitely would consider Lazarus for that very unique Spirit Shield Helm ability. We also have the brand new Deathwing Strikemaster that was sort of previewed during the Munitorum Field Manual updates. He got surreptitiously added into the Dark Angel section, even though no one had ever seen him before or knew what he did. And I think it got people kind of excited. Unfortunately, they got excited for nothing because this guy is boring as hell. What if lieutenants could take Terminator armor? That's just what this is. This is just a lieutenant with Terminator armor. He doesn't even have any special abilities. It's really disappointing. With the loss of Combined Assault, I was sort of hoping that the Strikemaster would bring maybe a replacement, a buff for Deathwing, something cool and unique that he could be doing for them, but he just doesn't do that. You'd think with a name like Strikemaster, he would make your deep striking more powerful. Like maybe you can come in within 8 inches of an enemy, or you can get +1 to charge if you come out of deep strike that turn within an aura of him. So like you could stack up to +3 to charge, and then with a reroll, you're only looking for a 6. It's pretty consistent, but nah, he doesn't do anything special. He's got tactical precision and an aura. He's just a lieutenant. Interestingly, he can take Deathwing Knight equipment, so you can bring him with the Mace of Absolution and the Power and the Storm Shield if you want. Although he is kind of expensive, starts at 95 points, 110 with that loadout. And bringing in only a lieutenant stat line of 3 attacks is like, so disappointing. Even the Talonmaster for 160 has like a boatload of guns. He's pretty okay in melee, and he has a unique ability that ignores cover for Ravenwing stuff. And I wish the Strikemaster had something like that, and he doesn't. So, unfortunately, probably just throw this guy out. I don't know if he's really ever going to see play. We also have the Interrogator-Chaplain. Notice that it is correctly entered into the HQ slot here and not the Elite slot. So, congratulations on Games Workshop. They're going up in the world. And then we're moving through some of the existing profiles. Now, unfortunately, none of these profiles have gotten any points changes or anything at all. I actually went through and I started making like a whole spreadsheet about all the points changes. I was going to lock down every single one of them, and as far as I can see, nothing has changed. So if you are playing with your Battle Scribe right out of the supplement, it's all going to be exactly the same. Sort of interesting that it feels like the designers have costed the new abilities of the faction. Sort of interesting that the designers haven't really considered that these new abilities are going to cost this faction any additional points from what they've already been paying. So it's just a strict buff to the whole faction. Everything is just getting better for the most part. Deathwing Knights we have here. Potentially RIP. We'll see how the meta shakes out, but I'm not sure that we're going to see them anymore. Deathwing Command Squads are here as well, which I think will continue to see a lot of play, especially with their guns. The Ravenwing Apothecary, importantly, has kept its 6-inch Narthessium aura rather than the 3-inch aura that the standard Apothecaries get. No one knows why it's bigger, but it is. As well as the aircraft, interestingly, the Dark Talon's Stasis Bomb is the same effect as the Stasis Grenade. Makes a ton of sense. Like a Stasis Grenade stratagem. But that does mean that you no longer need to bring a Dark Talon to get access to that no fallback effect. So if you need it, you can just bring some random dude with a grenade launcher. And last but not least, the Jet Fighter. Now, what was missing out of this? Codex leak that's going around are the Black Knight's data datasheet, although they are in the points section, so it doesn't look like they're missing or anything. They're exactly the same points as they were, so I imagine nothing else in that unit's changed. That said, as I've talked about a billion times in this review, I do think Black Knights are going to be incredible. I think a big meaty unit of them running up the table to start the game, hitting your opponent with a bunch of plasma damage with Weapons of the Dark Age, and then getting in, hit and running your opponent's army, potentially with full rerolls in melee, and playing a really aggressive board control oriented game plan is going to be really powerful and very difficult to get through, especially with the very defensive secondary objectives that Dark Angels are going to be incentivized to take. So they can sort of create this immense amount of table space that your opponent has to clear out these biker units that are fighting them, then also move back up the table. It's going to be so difficult to play against these guys. And I think the faction is going to be really strong for that reason. I guess we're also missing pages for the Dark Shroud and the Vengeance, but that's okay. Rest assured, they're still in there. Unfortunately, the datasheets just didn't get transferred over, but given that nothing else in the entire codex changed, I think it's safe to say that these are staying exactly the same. So a little bit of a whimper rather than a bang in this Codex review. Given that none of these models really changed, they're mostly staying almost identical, but at least that means that we know what we're dealing with when we're considering new Dark Angels lists, and we can sort of talk from a position of experience, just taking the existing datasheets and transferring them over to the new stratagems and abilities that this faction has. I'm actually really excited to play against new Dark Angels. Despite the fact that I think they're going to be very powerful, I don't think that they are going to be unreasonably powerful, and I also think that it's going to be an interesting faction to play against. They're very first punch oriented, but the rest of the faction is going to be relatively slow. And that also means that because they're so short ranged and aggressive, they're going to move into your threat ranges to fight you. So they're going to fight you in the center of the table, and you have to, be able to deal with them, and they're very interactive as a faction. They're not like, these new Death Guard lists that are just trying to overlap defensive auras to make it impossible for you to fight with them. And it doesn't look to me like they're going to be playing too much of a hit and run game where they're just trying to run away and play super flighty. I think that they're just going to come in and we're going to have a big scrum in the middle, and whoever wins is going to win the game. It might not be the most interesting design for a faction, but I think it is definitely the most fun for both players. So I think it's going to be interesting to see Dark Angels on the table, and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. We should have some more videos about Dark Angels coming on the channel pretty soon, as well as these Codex reviews. I hope everyone gleaned some useful information from these. Big thanks to my patrons over at patreon.com/tacticaltortoise for supporting the channel. Also, the channel members, you can join the membership in the link down below the video. That's pretty cool. You get some good emojis and stuff you can use on YouTube that nobody else gets, which is sweet. And we should be opening up some new emojis for that pretty soon, so I can add some more benefits to the YouTube members. So I haven't talked about the YouTube membership in a while, so if, I don't know, you want to support the channel in a different way that's not just Patreon, you can get on there. It's pretty sweet stuff. Thanks again for watching, everyone. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and, as always, have happy wargaming.